The security guard was already walking toward my desk when I realized Patricia Caldwell wasn't bluffing. 26 years with Morrison Aerospace Manufacturing, and it was ending because my khakis were the wrong shade of navy. Name's Anthony Morrison, 52 years old, and until that Tuesday morning in September, I was Senior Director of International Sales at Morrison Aerospace. Yeah, same last name as the company founder. Pure coincidence, though it sure confused people at industry conferences. Been happening for decades. Let me back up to where this whole mess started. About 6 months earlier, Patricia Caldwell became our new CEO. Harvard MBA, 44 years old, all about transforming workplace culture and modernizing our strategic approach. The board brought her in to take us public within 2 years. Made sense. The aerospace industry was booming, and we had solid fundamentals. But Patricia came with baggage. Her son Nathan had been working at Morrison for 10 months already. Some kind of management training program that landed him in operations. 29 years old, MBA from Northwestern, and about as much real-world manufacturing experience as my golden retriever. The kid talked a good game about disruption and innovation, but couldn't tell you the difference between a turbofan and a turbojet if his life depended on it. When Patricia took over, Nathan's trajectory suddenly accelerated. 3 months into her tenure, he became VP of Operations. Fastest promotion in company history, which really went over well with the guys who'd been grinding it out for decades. Nothing says merit-based advancement like having the CEO's son leapfrog 15 years of experience. Around the same time, Patricia's niece Jessica joined the company as marketing director. 26 years old, fresh from some state school MBA program. At least she seemed embarrassed about the family connection, unlike Nathan, who strutted around like he'd earned his position through pure genius. The changes started small. Mandatory innovation workshops where 25-year veterans like me sat through PowerPoints about disruptive thinking and agile methodologies. Then came the open office plan, because apparently walls were barriers to collaboration. Never mind that aerospace manufacturing involves sensitive technical discussions and client calls where you need privacy. Through all this chaos, I kept my head down and focused on what I did best, bringing in business. My track record spoke for itself. $85 million in annual contracts across 8 to 12 deals per year. Not flashy startup money, but solid, reliable aerospace contracts that kept 200 people employed and shareholders happy. The big opportunity came 14 months ago when Transcontinental Airways started exploring fleet modernization. Their VP of Fleet Operations, James Patterson, was a Navy guy like me. We'd crossed paths at industry events over the years. Good man, understood the technical side of aviation, and appreciated working with people who'd been around long enough to know what they were talking about. Building the transcontinental relationship took time, not the kind of time Nathan's generation understands. I'm talking months of technical discussions, facility tours, late-night calls when Patterson had concerns about delivery schedules or maintenance protocols. You don't rush a $280 million deal involving 150 aircraft over 5 years. The package included our latest engine modifications, upgraded avionics systems, and comprehensive service contracts. It was the kind of deal that makes careers and defines company trajectories. Patterson and I had developed genuine trust. He'd call me directly with questions, not because he had to, but because he knew I'd give him straight answers. When his CFO raised concerns about our delivery timeline, I arranged personal meetings with our production managers. When their pilots had questions about the new avionics interface, I set up simulator sessions at our testing facility. That's how you build $280 million relationships. One conversation, one problem solved, one promise kept at a time. It's not about PowerPoint presentations or innovation buzzwords. It's about understanding that when someone trusts you with their fleet modernization, they're trusting you with their company's future. But while I was nurturing this crucial relationship, Patricia and Nathan were busy modernizing our workplace culture. The casual Friday policy became casual every day, except it wasn't really casual. They handed out this specific list of approved brands and colors that basically required shopping trips to stores I'd never heard of. Suddenly, Khakis that had been perfectly professional for 15 years were inconsistent with our evolving brand identity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, closing the biggest deal in Morrison's recent history, while getting dress code lectures from people who couldn't explain how a jet engine actually works. But I figured it was temporary. New CEOs always want to make their mark, establish authority, show the board they're making changes. Eventually, results would matter more than pants color. I was wrong. The formal dress code policy rolled out on a Monday in September. Nathan sent the company-wide email with attached photos showing acceptable professional attire. The photos looked like they'd been pulled from a tech startup's recruiting materials. Young, diverse models wearing clothes that cost more than most people's car payments. The policy wasn't just about looking professional, it was targeted, surgical in its precision. The approved styles just happened to exclude everything that guys my age typically wore. The colors were specific enough that you'd need a fashion consultant to navigate them. The brand requirements eliminated anything you could buy at normal department stores. It was workplace discrimination disguised as modernization, and everyone knew it. But proving it? That's a different story. Smart lawyers write policies that look neutral on paper while achieving very specific results in practice. The enforcement began immediately. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was reviewing final contract details for the transcontinental deal. We were 2 weeks away from signatures, and Patterson's CFO had requested clarification on our service warranty terms. Technical stuff that required careful wording and industry knowledge, the kind of work that doesn't care what color your pants are. Nathan Caldwell was making his rounds, clipboard in hand like some kind of fashion inspector. The kid had been doing these compliance checks for a week, targeting specific people. Funny how he never seemed to visit the marketing department where his cousin Jessica worked, or the executive floor where his mother held court. He stopped at my desk around 10:30, looked me up and down like I was a recruit who'd shown up with scuffed boots. I was wearing my standard navy blue Dockers, same brand I'd worn for 15 years, same brand the previous CEO had complimented at the company Christmas party. Morrison, those khakis don't meet the new guidelines. The navy blue isn't from the approved palette. I looked up from my contract review. Nathan, these are professional attire. I've got a client call with Transcontinental's CFO in an hour to discuss warranty terms. The policy is clear. All employees need to adhere to the new standards. No exceptions. He had this smirk, like he was enjoying this way too much. 29 years old and drunk on the power of making a 52-year-old Navy veteran squirm over clothing. Now, I'd raised 2 kids and dealt with teenage attitudes before, but this was different. This was my career, my livelihood, and some kid with an MBA and a famous last name was treating me like I'd shown up in pajamas. Look, I understand there's a new policy, but I'm not running to the mall between client meetings. These are clean, professional pants that have served me well for years. Nathan pulled out his phone without hesitation. Mom, we have a situation with Morrison. He's refusing to comply with dress code policy. Yeah, he called the CEO mom in front of me, in front of my colleagues. Real professional behavior from our VP of operations. The next 15 minutes felt like the longest of my career. I tried to focus on my contract review, but the whole office had gone quiet. People were pretending to work while watching this drama unfold. Some looked sympathetic, others just relieved they weren't in my shoes. Patricia Caldwell arrived with her entourage, Nathan, Jessica, and Sarah from HR. The whole family business, plus legal backup. Jessica looked uncomfortable, kept avoiding eye contact. At least someone in that family had a conscience. Patricia didn't waste time with pleasantries. Anthony, we've discussed the importance of company-wide policy compliance. This isn't just about clothes, it's about commitment to our new direction and respect for established protocols. Patricia, I've brought in $85 million in contracts annually for the past 3 years. The transcontinental deal alone represents $280 million over 5 years. I think my commitment to this company speaks for itself. Past performance doesn't excuse current insubordination. We need team players who embrace change, not anchors dragging us backward into outdated practices. That's when I knew this wasn't about khakis or company culture. This was about clearing out the old guard, making room for Patricia's vision of a younger, more dynamic workforce. The dress code was just the excuse they needed to justify what they'd probably wanted to do for months. Fine. If this is how you want to handle 26 years of dedicated service, that's your call. But you should know the transcontinental deal requires final approval next week. James Patterson specifically requested me for the closing negotiations because of our working relationship. Nathan jumped in like he'd been waiting for this moment. I've been reviewing that file extensively. I can handle the closing. How complicated can it be? We've got their specs, they've got our proposal. It's just paperwork at this point. I almost laughed out loud. How complicated can it be? This kid thought business deals were like ordering coffee through an app. Point, click, done. He had no idea about the months of relationship building, the technical discussions about engine modifications, the late-night calls when Patterson had concerns about maintenance schedules or pilot training requirements. The transcontinental package wasn't just aircraft purchases. It included custom avionics integration, specialized maintenance protocols, pilot training programs, and 5-year service contracts. Patterson's team had specific requirements based on their route structures and operational needs, details that were never written down because they came from conversations, trust, and understanding built over 14 months. Nathan, this isn't a simple transaction. It's a comprehensive partnership that requires, "I've got this, Morrison. Maybe it's time for some fresh thinking on these legacy accounts." Legacy accounts. There it was, the real attitude behind the dress code enforcement. Everything about our traditional approach was legacy and needed disruption. Never mind that legacy meant proven, reliable, and profitable. "Your call," I said, standing up from my desk. "Security's waiting, I assume?" Sarah from HR stepped forward with a folder. "Anthony, we'll need your company phone, laptop, and access cards. Security will escort you to collect personal items." The walk to my car was surreal. 26 years of relationships, industry knowledge, client trust, all tossed aside because my pants were the wrong shade of blue. I sat in the parking lot for a while thinking about my son's college tuition payment due next month, my daughter's wedding expenses, my own retirement accounts that suddenly felt inadequate. But here's what Patricia and her family dynasty didn't understand. About the aerospace industry, it runs on relationships built over decades, not quarterly innovation metrics. You can't disrupt 30-year client partnerships with enthusiasm and PowerPoint slides. You can't replace institutional knowledge with fresh thinking and good intentions. The transcontinental deal wasn't just about Morrison Aerospace's superior products. It was built on James Patterson's trust in me personally, his confidence that when problems arose, and they always do in aerospace, he'd have someone who understood both the technical and business implications. Nathan Caldwell was about to learn that lesson the hard way, and I was about to make sure that education was as expensive as possible. James Patterson called me that same afternoon. Word travels fast in the aerospace industry, especially when a major deal point person gets fired over dress code violations. The absurdity of it made the story spread even faster. "Anthony, I just heard the news from Tom Bradley over at Northwind. What the hell happened over there? Tom said Morrison canned you for wearing the wrong pants? New management, new priorities. They've decided to go with younger leadership for client relationships." Nathan Caldwell? The kid who asked me if our pilots needed special training for digital flight controls last time we met? You're kidding me. I had to smile at that. Nathan had indeed asked Patterson if modern aircraft required additional pilot certification for digital systems, apparently not realizing that commercial aviation had been using digital flight controls for 30 years. It was like asking if cars needed special licenses for power steering. "James, you know I can't discuss Morrison's internal operational decisions. But I can tell you that if I were in your position, I'd be very careful about who I'm trusting with a $280 million fleet modernization program." There was a pause on the line. Patterson didn't get to be VP of Fleet Operations at Transcontinental by missing subtle communications. "What are you thinking, Anthony?" "Well, I'm suddenly available for consulting work. And it happens that Tom Bradley over at Northwind has been looking to expand their commercial aviation division. They've been primarily defense contractors for 40 years, but they've got a small commercial unit that's been growing." Tom Bradley, I do remember him from the Boeing days. Solid engineer, good reputation. Think he'd be interested in a conversation about fleet modernization? I think he'd be very interested. Northwind's got the technical capability, proven manufacturing processes, and they're hungry for commercial market share. Plus, they understand that aerospace partnerships are built on relationships, not just quarterly metrics. What I didn't tell Patterson was that I'd already called Tom Bradley an hour earlier. Tom and I had known each other for 15 years, worked together on several defense contracts where Morrison provided components for Northwind's military aircraft. He understood both the technical and business sides of aerospace manufacturing. "Anthony," Tom had said when I explained my situation, "Patricia Caldwell fired you over pants? That's the stupidest thing I've heard since Lockheed tried to make engineers wear ties on the factory floor." Tom's reaction was immediate. What would it take to bring that transcontinental deal to Northwind? We've got the production capacity, and our commercial division has been looking for exactly this kind of breakthrough contract. The beauty of the aerospace industry is that technical specifications are technical specifications. Transcontinental needed specific engine modifications, avionics upgrades, and service protocols. Northwind had been manufacturing similar systems for military applications for decades. The transition from defense to commercial wasn't just possible, it was logical. More importantly, Tom understood that Patterson's concerns weren't just about products. They were about trust, reliability, and having partners who understood the stakes involved in fleet operations. When you're responsible for 150 aircraft carrying millions of passengers annually, you don't experiment with unproven relationships. Here's what I'm thinking, I told Patterson during our call. Why don't you and your CFO take a tour of Northwind's facilities next week, see their manufacturing processes, meet their engineering team? Tom Bradley can walk you through their quality control systems and delivery capabilities. What about our timeline? We're supposed to finalize with Morrison next week. That's entirely your decision, James. But I'd suggest you have a backup plan ready. You've invested 14 months in this modernization project. You don't want it derailed by inexperienced account management. The following week played out exactly like I expected. Nathan Caldwell showed up to the Morrison Transcontinental meeting with PowerPoint slides and talking points prepared by people who'd never actually closed an aerospace deal. No understanding of Patterson's specific operational concerns. No knowledge of the custom modifications Transcontinental needed for their route structures. No relationship to fall back on when the technical questions got complicated. I heard about it from a friend still at Morrison. Nathan had spent 20 minutes presenting standard product features that Transcontinental had already reviewed and approved months earlier. When Patterson asked about pilot training protocols for the new avionics interface, Nathan referred him to standard documentation that didn't address Transcontinental's specific operational requirements. The killer moment came when Patterson's CFO asked about maintenance cost projections over the 5-year service contract. Nathan pulled out spreadsheets showing industry averages, completely missing the fact that Transcontinental's routes included high-altitude operations that required specialized maintenance schedules, details I'd discussed with Patterson extensively, requirements that were never formally documented because they came from understanding his operational challenges. Patterson called me that evening. That was painful, Anthony. The kid meant well, but he was completely out of his depth. Kept talking about optimizing synergies and leveraging best practices like he was reading from a business school textbook. How did it end? We told them we needed more time to review their proposal, bought ourselves some breathing room while we explore alternatives. Good thinking. Tom Bradley called this afternoon. Northwind's prepared to present their proposal Thursday if you're interested. The Northwind presentation was everything Morrison's wasn't. Tom Bradley brought his senior engineers, not PowerPoint slides. They addressed Transcontinental's specific operational requirements, not generic industry solutions. When Patterson asked technical questions, he got detailed answers from people who'd actually built similar systems for military applications. More importantly, Tom understood the relationship dynamics. James, we know this is a significant decision that goes beyond product specifications. You're trusting us with your fleet modernization program, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. Anthony will be our senior consultant on this project. You'll have continuity with someone who understands your operational needs. Patterson looked at me across the conference table. 26 years of aerospace experience, 14 months of relationship building, and countless technical discussions had led to this moment. Morrison Aerospace had thrown it all away over the wrong shade of blue pants. Tom, I think we need to have a serious conversation about moving forward with Northwind. The Northwind contract signing happened 3 weeks later, same $280 million deal, different company. Tom Bradley brought me on as senior strategic consultant with a generous retainer fee that covered my son's remaining college tuition and left enough for a substantial down payment on my daughter's wedding venue. Patterson's CFO had required board approval for the vendor change, which took 2 weeks of presentations and due diligence. But once Transcontinental's technical team toured Northwind's facilities and reviewed their quality control processes, the decision became obvious. Northwind had 40 years of aerospace manufacturing experience, proven delivery capabilities, and most importantly, they understood that client relationships matter more than corporate politics. The best part of the whole situation was watching it unfold through industry connections. Aviation Week published a small piece about the deal transfer, mentioning operational concerns with Morrison's new account management structure. That's trade publication speak, for they screwed up badly. My former colleague Steve called me the day after the announcement. "Anthony, you should see the panic over here. Patricia's been in emergency meetings with the board for 2 days. Nathan's claiming you somehow sabotaged the deal, but nobody believes that story when it's obvious he couldn't handle the technical requirements." How's the mood in the office? Tense. People are realizing that the dress code enforcement wasn't really about modernizing company culture. It was about clearing out experienced employees to make room for Patricia's preferred demographic. But now they've lost the biggest deal in 5 years, and the board is asking hard questions. Within a month, the broader consequences became clear. Morrison's stock price dropped 8% when the quarterly earnings report showed the transcontinental loss. For a company with annual revenues around $850 million, losing a $280 million multi-year contract represents significant financial impact. The board demanded explanations, and Patricia's workforce modernization strategy suddenly looked like expensive amateur hour. Nathan was quietly moved to a special projects role, corporate speak, for we can't fire the CEO's son, but we can make sure he never touches another major client relationship. Jessica, meanwhile, found herself caught between family loyalty and professional survival as marketing budgets got slashed to offset the revenue loss. The industry impact extended beyond just Morrison. Word spreads fast in aerospace manufacturing, and the story of a 26-year veteran getting fired over pants color became a cautionary tale about prioritizing image over substance. I started getting calls from other companies looking to hire experienced sales directors who understood that client relationships can't be disrupted by generational workplace politics. 6 months after my firing, I ran into Patricia Caldwell at the National Aerospace Manufacturing Conference in Chicago. She looked older, more tired. The IPO plans had been shelved indefinitely after the transcontinental loss, and industry rumors suggested the board was conducting a comprehensive leadership review. She approached my booth during the networking reception, trying to look casual while clearly wanting to have a conversation. "Anthony, how are things at Northwind?" "Pretty good, Patricia. We just landed the Federal Express modernization contract, $190 million over 4 years. I didn't mention that FedEx had been Morrison's white whale for years, a contract they'd never been able to crack despite multiple attempts. Her face went pale. That's great news. Look, I know things ended badly between us, but you have to understand, we were trying to modernize our workplace culture, to appeal to a broader, more diverse workforce. By firing your most experienced sales director over the wrong shade of khakis? It wasn't personal, Anthony. It was about establishing consistent standards and company-wide policy compliance. I looked at her for a long moment. Patricia Caldwell, Harvard MBA, transformation expert, company culture guru. Still didn't understand what had actually happened. Patricia, you want to know what company culture really is? It's when a 26-year veteran walks out the door and takes $280 million worth of institutional relationships with him. It's when your clients stop trusting your judgment because you prioritize dress codes over proven performance. It's when your board realizes that all the innovation workshops in the world can't replace decades of industry knowledge and client trust. She started to respond, but I was done with the conversation. Had clients to see, deals to close, relationships to nurture. The Federal Express team was expecting me for dinner, and Tom Bradley wanted to discuss expanding our commercial aviation portfolio. As I walked away from Patricia Caldwell that evening, I thought about those Navy khakis hanging in my closet at home. Wrong shade for Morrison Aerospace's modernized workplace culture, apparently. But they looked just fine at Northwind, where experience and results mattered more than arbitrary style guidelines. The manufacturing industry, especially aerospace, runs on trust, institutional knowledge, and relationships built over decades. You can't disrupt those fundamentals with dress codes and generational bias. You can't replace 26 years of client relationships with enthusiasm and MBA buzzwords. Sometimes the old ways work because they're the right ways. Sometimes tradition and experience matter more than innovation and disruption. And sometimes a $280 million lesson is exactly what it takes to remind people of those simple truths. 3 months later, I heard through industry connections that Patricia Caldwell had decided to pursue other opportunities. Nathan landed a consulting position at a startup where his disruptive thinking and fresh perspectives would presumably be more appreciated. Jessica transferred to Morrison's Denver office, trying to rebuild her career away from family connections. As for me, Northwind offered me a permanent position as Director of Strategic Accounts. Better salary, better benefits, equity participation, and a company that valued experience over arbitrary policies. My consulting success with the Transcontinental and FedEx deals had established Northwind as a serious player in commercial aviation. The final irony came when Morrison's new CEO, Patricia's replacement, called me personally to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Apparently, they'd realized that burning bridges with experienced industry professionals might not be the best long-term strategy. I politely declined. 26 years of loyalty had earned me exactly zero consideration when it mattered, but 6 months of proven results at Northwind had earned me respect, equity, and a secure future. Sometimes you don't realize how much you're worth until someone else is willing to pay for it. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being successful somewhere that appreciates what you bring to the table. And sometimes those wrong shade navy khakis are exactly the right color after all.